The doctor is telling me that I have cancer of the mouth and not much longer to live. I wanted to share some of my life with you before I pass. I was born in Marion County on March 12th of 1850, a couple years after Morrow County was formed. My father, Johann George Retterer, was born in Rittershofen, Alsace, France on May 3rd of 1821. He did what he needed to provide for his family. One of the jobs he held was as a stagecoach driver between Marion and Upper Sandusky. On his trips, he would often meet up with Indians. He was a deacon in the Lutheran Church for several years. As far as his public career, he was trustee of Richland Township in Marion County, member of the Board of Agriculture for 14 years, 3 years as its president, 7 years as its vice president. He was director of the Marion County Infirmary for 7 years and a county commissioner for several years. He was serving the Marion County public when the Marion County Courthouse was built in 1885. My mother, her name was Catherine, and depending on if you use the last name that she had before she came to America or after she got here, it was either Moyer or Myers. I was married to Martha Carter, who bore me 3 lovely daughters and 1 son. Martha passed way too soon in March of 1901. After a time of grieving, I married my second wife, Mrs. Caroline Briggle, to whom I have been happily married ever since. My last name was Retterer, but I felt it was too cumbersome to pronounce both ers. So I dropped the last, well, maybe it was the first er. Anyhow, I dropped one of the ers and became Henry Retter. I was a well-known auctioneer in Marion County, as well as a stock dealer. This helped with my transition to politics. I once ran for the position of director of the Morrow County Infirmary, and here's what the Morrow County Independent said about me. H. Retterer, candidate for infirmary director, has lived in the county 29 years, served 3 terms as mayor of Cardington, has made it as a successful farmer, and is a popular auctioneer, noted for his kindness to dumb animals and his care for the poor of his town. A good man in every way. Made me sound like a saint. Well, I didn't win that one. In 1906, I was elected mayor of Cardington. I served as mayor for 4 terms between 1906 and 1917, just not consecutive terms. As mayor, I wanted to bring an end to lawlessness. I stopped the speeding of horses on our streets. The saloons are now to be closed every weekday evening at 9:30 o'clock and all day on Sunday. A curfew bell is rung every night at 8 o'clock, and there's a ban on card playing for a prize. Really got things cleaned up in this town. I wanted to beautify our village and provide a way to remember our county's past. In 1858, Julius Lindstedt built a log cabin about 3 miles west of Cardington. In 1910, the village bought the structure and dismantled it and moved it to the old Depot Grove, later known as Redder Park. They bought the cabin for $200. The cabin became a museum filled with artifacts from the area's history. Some items on display were a silver ring and ornament from George Washington's sword, Civil and Revolutionary War weapons and equipment, early kitchen utensils, early farm implements, and nailed to the rafter, stretching nearly the width of the room, was a skin of a South American snake killed by Clarence Steiner, as well as other countless items. This was not only a popular place to hold family reunions and picnics, but was right at the train depot. This gave passengers getting off the train a pleasant place to rest and enjoy. A few years ago, the area between Depot Street and the railroad was a swamp. The village filled in the swamp, made walks, built a bandstand, purchased seats for the bandstand, made flower beds to make a place pleasant. To make this place a pleasant one for rest and recreation. In 1911, the village sold the cabin to me for $25. This caused quite an uproar. This went to probate court, and the council and myself were charged with collusion and fraud. I hope the future generations will continue to maintain the cabin for countless generations to enjoy. We have been through some hard times in Cardington and as a nation, the Spanish flu, a war across the ocean that we were drawn into, as well as the flood of 1913, and I hope Cardington never has another natural disaster like that. But Cardington has endured, and I am sure will continue for years to come. It's now mid-December of 1918. I know that my time in this world is drawing to a close. I hope that I have left a legacy for the upcoming generations. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
My parents were immigrants from Germany, and they settled in the area approximately 30 to 40 miles northwest of here. We're not really sure because it was like a small community of Germans. Nobody in the community spoke English. But then when the children were born, they had a English taught school there that the kids all went to the school from 1st grade to 6th grade, where they were raised as American kids then, and they went on their part out in the world. And it was somewhere around the area where I met my wife Lulu, and we needed a farm, we needed somewhere to go, so I applied by mail for a government land grant. And we were fortunate to receive one. That the farm is located in Richland Township of Marion County on Newman's Cardington Road, just west of 746. And the only stipulation to it was, well, we had to pay back the loan, but in today's dollars, it was pennies on the dollars but it had to remain as a working farm because the area was out of food. There was a lot of influx in people coming, and there wasn't food, and Kroger's wasn't as big in the 1900s as it was now. But we had a working farm. Our main livestock were sheep, and we're big in the turkey production. Of course, everybody had a milk cow, and you had your own chickens for eggs. And of course, being from German descent, we had a vineyard out there too, which I knew how to ferment grape juice and keep it in a barrel where it would keep for several years if needed. But the area out there, as we'd come to town and people would say, well, where are you from? As we'd trade our stuff, and we'd say, well, out there at the Windfall area. Well, everybody knew where that was, but why was it called Windfall? Well, once upon a time in the 20s or somewhere, it was either a straight line wind or it was a tornado. It laid a path 3/4 to a mile long and about a half mile wide, where it just devastated the trees, and everything was flat. So it was known as the Windfall. And today the area is still known as Windfall. But when in the Great Depression, which we didn't know there was a Great Depression because we just worked the farm, we had what we had. We thought we were rich, but we came to town with our fresh produce or some fresh butchered chickens and our eggs that we would barter with and get things that we had to have from town. And people didn't have any money in town anymore, but we could still trade for some commodities that they had. And then there came into the 40s where we had the Great War coming along. Well, I had 2 sons that were they were real helpful on the farm, but they were just about to the draft age. And one day 2 gentlemen rolled in a big fancy car, and I said, this cannot be good. And they got out, and it was men from the government. And they said, Mr. Heimlich, you raise turkeys? And he said, yes, I do. And he said, can you double your production? And he said, well, I won't have nowhere to sell them. And he says, no, you're not understanding. We'll bring you the small ones, you raise them, we will come get them. And they took them over somewhere towards Kenton, where they processed them. And then there was a canning place where they canned them and canned turkey, and it went to France, Germany, and all over the world to feed the troops. But I said, I cannot raise any more turkeys without my sons here. And they said, okay, that's good enough. Your sons will not go to war, but they will be raising turkeys at least till the end of the war.
It's a barter.
Yes, it was, but it came out that way. My oldest son, he wasn't really much on the animals and doing chores, but he knew there had to be a better way to water these turkeys. And we got up to one time to 30 to 32,000. And these were, today, they're free range turkeys. But that's the only way you raise turkeys was in a big field. And then at night you had to put them up. But you had to carry them water by hand every morning and night and carry them feed every morning and night. Well, my son Robert Heimlich, he decided there had to be a better way to get, and there was a well clear up the house, but there was a creek here. So he set up a pump, a big old pitcher pump, to pump the water up, and then at one time he made 2 runs where he could get part of the pens without having to carry buckets of water and pour in there, and the turkeys running him over and pecking him to pieces and flopping him. And then later on he went to work for another contracting company, and he became a plumber. Whether this was due to the turkeys or it was just he had a fascination with how things needed to work. Then in the 1950s, there was a group of farmers around the area that said, why don't you join us? He said, we're going to buy a piece of property, and he said, we're going to save it, and we're going to educate kids about the farm way around here. So they formed a group called the Cardington Voag Farm Association, and I became a member of that back in the 50s, which I've had a granddaughter and her husband have both served on the committee, and today I have a great-grandson and a great-great-grandson that are members of the association to help support our Cardington FFA. So at one time I lost my wife, and I bought a house in town here, and it's on North Marion Street. Well, down beside the house there was a little field there, and you couldn't farm it because every time the water came up on the whetstone, it was flooded. It was a little lot there that was useless property. Well, I looked at the house and I decided that my neighbors were close and there was no way I was ever moving to town. So he said I just had a rental place there then. Well, then came the great tornado in 1977, I no longer had any use for the house, so I gave it to my children. But then in 1981, the great tornado of Cardington came through, and we all know what a mess that was. Well, some of the cleanup crew, they contacted my children and said, what is that lot going to be used for? Can we dump the debris over the hill, raise that up and flatten it out? And they said, well, sure, it's no good to us. So at some point in time then, after it was all seeded down, that the village and my children got together and they said, we don't need this property, it's useless. And somebody got the idea that we could build a park there. And they said, you can have that if you'll name it the Heimlich Park. And that's where, down here on Marion Street, that the Heimlich Park came from. So I'm glad to think and glad to know that some of the family that I've left behind is always looking to help people and to give something and to make the community a little better place. Thank you.
We're kind of focused over there under the tent. There's a headstone for a Stanley Shaw near the tent, and you can check that out when you leave, but I brought you over here because it's shaded, it's cooler, it's a little breeze. I think you'll enjoy it. My name is Virgil Shaw, and I live just east of Cardington, the Cardington Village, over on the Chesterville-Cardington Road. And I farm all that land just east of the village, about 120 acres. And I've lived, my farm's been there a long time. In my life, I've come to realize that we live among everyday heroes. And everyday heroes are what I define as ordinary people who do extraordinary things. And in my humble opinion, my son Stanley was an everyday hero. My son Stanley was a B-29 pilot during World War II, died on June the 15th, 1945, when his B-29 crashed off the coast of Guam. He was one of 500 B-29 planes that was flying to mainland Japan to bomb a Japanese city. The war in Europe had already ended. We were trying to finish out with Japan. His plane crashed. His body was never recovered, but nonetheless, a gravestone exists in memory of him. In my humble opinion, Stanley was an everyday hero, and I come here often to commemorate and think about him. And it was on that time, June 15th of this year, that I was here visiting Stanley's grave, and a tall, young, handsome man, well, young in the terms of in my 78th year, he was a young man, and he came up to me, and I don't know where he was at or why he was here, and he introduced himself as, my name's Carl Ackerman, and I knew your son Stanley. And Stanley was a year behind me in school. I knew Stanley was a B-29 pilot. I knew Stanley lost his life in the war, and I offer you my condolences. And I told Carl Ackerman, I know who you are, and I remember you. And I know too that you were a B-29 pilot during the war. And I want to hear your story about your time in the service to the United States. And he obliged me and talked to me about his time during the war. Carl told me he came from the Windfall area, which is west of Cardington here, and that he enlisted in the Army Air Corps shortly after Pearl Harbor. He knew he would be drafted. If he joined the Air Corps, he had more options. He always wanted to fly, and he joined the Army Air Corps. And after about 2 years of training, 2 full years, he got his wings in February of 1944. And he was rated in multi-engine airplanes, which means bombers. He could fly the B-26 bomber, and he could also fly the B-17 bomber. And they wanted to send him to a base where he could perfect his flying and eventually instruct others how to fly the B-17. That was our main bomber. And lo and behold, his base was Lockbourne Field down Columbus, and this was just perfect for him. He could drive home to visit his parents. They were 50 miles away, and he came home often. Well, he wasn't at Lockbourne more than probably 5 or 6 months, and he got a special packet of information from the Army and asking him to volunteer for a special project. And of course, he said, Mr. Shaw, in the Army, you don't volunteer for anything. And he politely said, thank you, but no thank you. Whatever your special project is, I'm not interested. Signed off on it, and then about maybe a week later, he was in a class taking navigational training, and 2 MPs came into the classroom. And they called out 4 names. And he said, one of them was mine, Carl Ackerman. And they instructed him to gather up all of his gear and come with them. And they gave him a police escort, a military police escort to the train station. And his orders were to go to Lincoln, Nebraska, which he did. Well, Lincoln, Nebraska was a base where they were training pilots on the newest and largest bomber of the war, the B-29. And he was instructed within a month he was flying B-29 bombers. And then he shortly thereafter went to Wendover, Utah. Wendover was a base out in the middle of nowhere on the Utah-Nevada border. Very desolate, cold in the wintertime, but that's where they were training. And they had with them 17 special B-17 bombers. These were designed without armor plate. The only machine guns on them for defensive purpose was a tail gunner. They didn't have the top turret, bottom turret, side gunners like all other bombers had. And they could fly at 38,000 feet. Most bombers could only fly at 25 to 30,000 feet. 38,000 put them out of range of flak, put them out of range of enemy fighters. The one thing they were doing, they were practicing their training, dropping single bombs that weighed 10,000 pounds. A single bomb, not multiple bombs like the B-29s normally carried, And as soon as they would drop their bomb at 30,000 feet, the single bomb is made out of plaster and cement, just a weight more or less. As soon as they dropped that bomb, they went into a 155-degree turn. Now, a turn straight backwards is 180 degrees. So you can see they're aiming almost back and then diving at the same time, as if to stay away from the blast that would come up from this bomb. So they didn't know what they were doing or why they were doing this. They simply followed orders. They were told, don't you talk about what we're doing. We're the 509th Composite Group. Don't talk about it. Don't pay attention to what other people are doing. You pay attention to your job only. And if you don't like that kind of standard, you can go to another base. You can leave this. Another base being Alaska. Not a desirable place to be stationed during the war. And so about January of 1945, they flew these special bombers to the Pacific, to a place called Tinian Island. Tinian Island was one of several islands that were close to the Japanese mainland, meaning 1,200 miles close. Okinawa, Japan, that's why they were taking these islands. They wanted them so the Americans could put bases on them. Tinian was the largest base in the Pacific. On August the 6th, 1945, this was after, about 3 months after the Germans had surrendered. We were still fighting Japan. A single bomb arrived at Tinian Island and was loaded onto one of these B-29s. The B-29 upon which it was put was called the Enola Gay. It was flown by the commander of the 509th. The 509th had about 1,700 men as part of it, and all these crews. The guy's name was Paul Tibbets. And onto this plane was loaded one single bomb that would be called Little Boy, eventually. And on August the 6th, 6 bombers set off at Tinian Island for mainland Japan. 2 of them for weather planes, a plane to measure the bomb itself, the impact, a plane to photograph it, one to carry the bomb. And they headed for their target, which was the city of Hiroshima. And early in the morning of August 6th, the Enola Gay dropped a single atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima. First time in the history of mankind that an atomic weapon had been used in war. Now, not until President Truman announced the bombing of Hiroshima, Carl told me, did he know they were working on the project to deliver the atomic bomb. They were not told what they were doing. 3 days later, a second bomb was prepared to be delivered. This bomb called Fat Man. And it was located, it was loaded into a B-29 called Boxcar, and then for a takeoff in the early morning hours of August the 9th. Carl Ackerman was called by his commanding officer of Boxcar, Colonel Hopkins, and said, we have some British scientists that are going to observe the mission. And they're going to be riding on the photography plane called Big Stink. The other plane being the Great Artiste that was going to measure the bomb, the effects of the bomb. And Carl Ackerman was instructed, you take these British scientists, I mean, these were people that worked with Oppenheimer directly, and you're to orient them about this bomber, that in the case that the bomber might crash or ditch into the sea, your job is to instruct these 3 men how to get out of this bomber. One of the men was a rather large man, and he said, look, they actually went into the plane. You go through this little co-pilot's window if the plane crashes in the water, if we ditch. Well, the man looked at himself and looked at the window and said, I'm not sure I can get through that window. And Carl said, well, if you can't get through that window, here's a fire axe over here. Chop your way onto the through the fuselage with the fire axe, they're aluminum, and get out on the wing, if the plane's still floating. Well, he talked to them pilot to pilot. Pilots understood the dangers they were undertaking. These guys weren't pilots, and he scared them to death. So the middle of the night, he had gone home, gone to go back to his base, gone to bed, and he was awoken and told by sent word by the commanding officer, you need to come down here to the flight line. You need to fly on the plane with these observers. They're scared. And I'm afraid, as the pilot, that they might do something stupid, like grab the controls of the airplane if we were in danger, or try to get out of the plane, open something, whatever. And your job is to subdue them. And he said, well, Carl asked the pilot, how do you want me to do that? He said, club them over the head if you have to.
Oh,
And
alrighty
so
then.
that is how Carl Ackerman witnessed the dropping of the bomb in Nagasaki. The two planes, Boxcar and Big Stink, took off. They all took off, and they were flying 700 miles away to over to Iwo Jima, where they were to rendezvous. Boxcar and Great Artiste, the two planes, were flying in a circle in one pattern. They were waiting on Big Stink to arrive. Well, Big Stink was going to be flying in an opposite way, and eventually these planes would see each other because they were flying radio silence, and they would fly to the target together. Big Stink was flying at 38,000 feet. The other planes, 30,000 feet. They didn't see each other. Boxcar was told to wait 15 minutes. If you don't see Big Stink or somebody, go to the target. Boxcar flew for 45 minutes. And so their fuel became an issue. They flew to the target of Kokura, was the original target to drop the second atomic bomb, according to Carl. And they then left Kokura, they went to Nagasaki, and they dropped the bomb at 30,000 feet. The bomb was set to detonate at 2,000 feet above Nagasaki, and it virtually destroyed the center of that city. And Big Stink saw the blast from 38,000 feet and eventually did photograph the impact of the bomb. All three planes set back to go to Tinian Island, but Boxcar was low on fuel, and they flew to Okinawa instead. This mission was 1,300 miles one way. So it's like flying a third of the way across the United States. They got to Okinawa and made an emergency landing, and when Boxcar landed, the 3 of the 4 engines were shutting down for lack of fuel. When it finally came to a stop, it had 7 gallons of fuel left for the 4th engine. The other plane's not in dire of condition, but they refueled, went back to Tinian Island. And Carl Ackerman, who has now then witnessed, he told me, the atomic bombing of Nagasaki, was left service by Thanksgiving that same year he was home. And I asked Carl Ackerman, did it bother you that you were part of the mission to deliver atomic bombs? And he said, well, first of all, we had no idea what we were delivering. We knew it was something big. We were told whatever we were doing would end the war by a year and save American soldiers' lives. And he said, I was all in favor of anything that would do that. And he told me the second thing was, you know, there's only one good day of any war. That's the last day of the war. World War II ended 6 days after Nagasaki was bombed. So, Carl Ackerman came home, of course, going out of character, and he lived the rest of his life at Windfall area, which is west of here, and is buried at the cemetery there. In 1965, when my story is taking place, Carl Ackerman would never have divulged this information to me, Virgil Shaw. It was classified. He would never have done that. But for the purpose of telling you my story, that's the story. By the 1990s, this information wasn't classified anymore, and it was public. Carl Ackerman died in early 2020. And when he died, he was one of 3 people left of the 1,700 men of the 509th Composite Group. And today there's 1 man left, and he's a younger enlisted man. Younger enlisted man means he's probably about 102 years old now, but a little bit younger than the pilots, who are typically officers. But Carl is interred at the cemetery there in Windfall. Now the thing that I'm amazed by as a historian, there were 9 million men served in uniform in World War II, or men and women. And here is one of 9 million comes from this little farming community that witnessed a major event in the history of our country that ended the war. That astounds me. My father was in the war, maybe some of your fathers were, your grandfathers were, and here's the guy from Cardington. He attributed his success as a pilot. Several times he would say this. I attribute it to my teachers at Cardington. You know, he was good in math, physics, and science, probably chemistry. And I knew other pilots from this area that were good in math and chemistry and physics that became pilots. And Carl Ackerman credited his teachers. So that's the story of Carl Ackerman is told through Virgil Shaw. Stanley Shaw's grave is there. Stanley Shaw's body is not there, as I told you. Carl Ackerman and Stanley Shaw, truly everyday heroes. Did extraordinary things from this little creek. Thank you very much for your attention.
I, Walter Newton Briggs, was born to Alexandria Briggs and Emmeline Denzer Briggs on December 2nd, 1888. My father was the only sibling from his family who left Washington County, Pennsylvania to come to Morrow County. My mother was born 1 year after her family immigrated from Prussia, Germany to Morrow County. My father was a classic or progressive farmer, which he was open to and used more modern farming techniques during the time of his life. He built his main barn in 1898 when I was 10 years old, which stood for nearly 120 years. My parents endured losing 2 children during their lifetime. I was able to see my parents celebrate 60 years of marriage before my father's death. I'm the youngest of 4 children, with Nora being the oldest and my sister Nettie, both of whom are buried in the cemetery, alongside their husbands. We lost my sister Nora in a tragic interurban accident near Bellevue, Ohio in 1934. My brother William died at the age of 22 days and is buried at St. John Lutheran Cemetery. Eventually, my family will become members of this congregation. I attended school through the 8th grade at Shore School, which was on County Road 146. This was a one-room schoolhouse that used a wood stove for heating the building. I joined my father to farm our 55 acres, along with the Denzer farm, which had another 40 to 50 acres, alongside County Road 25, which was in the Westfield Township. I was able to fight typhoid fever, which I contracted around the age of 17. I lived through the Spanish flu epidemic and the flood of 1913. When I attempted to enlist for service during World War I, they deemed me too short and stout. I was told to go home and grow up. I continued to farm alongside my father, eventually meeting my future wife, Phoebe Maru Ferguson. My wife grew up here in Cardington and graduated from Cardington High School in 1910. She took coursework in business training and worked as a clerk at the People's Store in town. We were married April 5th, 1916 at Trinity United Methodist Church in Mount Gilead. After our wedding, we boarded a train in Mount Gilead and traveled to Indiana to visit our relatives. After setting up housekeeping on the Briggs farm and homestead, we worked hard raising chickens, geese, ducks, and milking cows, while using our workhorses to farm our land, growing field corn, soybeans, and wheat. We had several kinds of fruit trees and every kind of vegetable, and so that Maru could can and freeze our bounty. We truly lived off the land, which most farmers can continue to do so. Eventually, we converted to more modern machinery using tractors and combines. Maru and I raised our son, Robert Edwin Briggs, who was born in 1918. Bob grew up to be a farmer alongside me. He also had his own farm on the Newman's Cardington Road, raising sheep and farming his land. He was also a gifted carpenter and woodworker, working in many homes in the area. He married Grace Clunk from Waldo, and they raised 2 daughters, Karen and Carol. Windfall was at the center of their lives for many years. Our daughter Helen Louise Briggs was born in 1921. Both of our children attended the same one-room schoolhouse that I attended through 8th grade. Bob graduated from Cardington High School in 1936, and Helen graduated in 1939. Helen continued her education at Samaritan Hospital School of Nursing in Ashland, graduating in 1942. She enlisted in the Army Nurse Corps in 1943, in the height of World War II. It was difficult to send our daughter off to war, not really knowing if she was safe from harm. My wife worried she would return, turn to a smoker and drinker. Fortunately, she did not. Helen married Paul Geckley, who was from Windfall congregation and grew up on Clarendon Westfield Road. They raised their 3 daughters, Renita, Marla, and Gretchen, while Helen continued her nursing career for over 40 years. I was destined to be surrounded by strong, educated women in my long life, and they all served me well. I was blessed with 5 granddaughters and 7 great-grandchildren that I knew. One more great-grandson born later who bears my name as his middle. My wife, Maru, was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1957. She suffered greatly from the only treatment they had at the time. I continued without her for 29 years, continuing to farm, garden, raising chickens, helping my son with his sheep that he kept on his farm, along with the help of my children, their spouses, and my granddaughters. I endured severe osteoarthritis, especially my knees. Arthritis runs in our family, and my father also suffered from the disease. The only medical solution in the early 1960s was to place a metal rod at the top of my leg bone, all the way down to my lower leg. I was able to bend my leg again by continuing to farm, get up and down off the tracker, cook for myself on a wooden coal stove. We never had indoor plumbing in the farmhouse. Our water was from a cistern using a hand pump inside the house, and the purview was across from the chicken coop near the machinery barn. Our heat was from a wood and coal burning stove in the middle of our living room. Some nights were very cold, and the quilts my wife helped made keep me warm. Despite not having modern amenities, my 2 oldest granddaughters enjoyed the fact that we had one of the first televisions in the area. Go figure, he has a TV but no plumbing. After a car accident on 423 going to Marion for a Denzer reunion, I no longer drove a car. It didn't prevent me from driving a tractor on the back roads to my son's farm to help him with his crops. I lived on the farm until it was no longer safe for me to do so in the late 1970s. I began to split my time between my son and daughter-in-law's farm from May to October, and my daughter and son-in-law's home in Marion from November to April. For as long as I could, I climbed full staircases to sleep upstairs. And my son built a bathroom downstairs, and my bedroom was moved there too. I tended to get outside to hoe weeds and cut down corn stalks in our garden. My family took great care of me until it wasn't physically possible. Only near the end of my 97 years of life did I need to be in a nursing home. Until my death November 8th, 1986. I was the oldest living member of St. John Lutheran Church and the local Mason chapter. My life was filled with love, hard work, faith in God, and some difficult times. My family was beside me every step of the way, and I was blessed by their care and love.
I am Tracy Williamson, and I will be portraying Caroline Coomer. Our hearts keep best the portraits of our friends. They need no dumb remembrance of art. For love that faithful limner still extends, their sacred image stamped upon the heart. Within this picture gallery now and then, each one of us withdrawn from earthly strife, may find the faces of our loved and lost again, faithful as when they walked with us in life. We do not think that chaplets they have won, what words of wisdom they have left unsaid, but simply how we loved them as we mourn, remembering still the faces of our dead. My name is Caroline Coomer, Carrie as most called me. Those words are from a poem called In Memoriam by David G. Coomer, my husband's grandfather. My husband was Clayton Coomer, Sr. We had 5 children, 1 daughter and 4 sons, though to our despair, our youngest son died within the day of his birth. We lived in Lincoln Township in Cardington on the Coomer farm. My husband came from a long line of farmers and carried on that tradition on the land he got from his father, Henry Coomer. I stayed at home and managed the household and the kids. Clayton's grandfather purchased the family land of 100 acres in Lincoln Township in Morrow County in the spring of the year 1855, and that is when our family story began in the Cardington area. My husband was born on December 22nd, 1878. His parents were Henry Clark Coomer and Jane Jenny Kirkpatrick. He was one of 6 children to his parents. I was born Caroline Rose Howe on April 15th, 1902. My parents were George W. Howe and Marietta Olmsted. Clayton and I were married on April 15th, 1902 in Marengo, Ohio. Clayton was a tall, slender man with brown hair and gray eyes. We lived a simple life full of love and family. Our family grew and many generations of Coomers have been a part of the Cardington community. While you may not know of my husband and I directly, you may have heard of our grandchildren. Our son Henry had 3 sons, Eugene, Dale, and Don, all of whom graduated from Cardington. All of these boys continued the tradition of farming with the family in their early years. Eventually, they all branched off and found careers of their own and started families of their own and moved to different areas. Don and his brothers Gene and Dale all played football for CHS in the 1940s and 1950s. All three brothers wore the number 40. Don in particular loved sports and was very active in the Cardington athletic department. His love of sports found him as captain of the Cardington High School Pirates football team for 4 years, co-captain of the Pirates basketball team for 4 years. He played 2 years of baseball for the Pirates too. After graduation from CHS, he joined the staff at the North Electric Company in Galion, Ohio. That same year, he also enlisted in the U.S. Army National Guards, where he served our country for 6 years. Don's name is also on a plaque that is in front of the Victory Bell at the Cardington football field. Don and his wife Dory donated the money to make sure that the Victory Bell found its permanent home where it resides today, and to also memorialize the Coomer boys, honoring their playing days at Cardington. Gene passed away in 1982 and Dale in 2008. Don passed in 2023. A marker in front of the Victory Bell pays tribute to them. Another one of our grandsons, Larry Coomer, also made his mark in the athletic field. He is the son of our boy, Clayton Jr. Larry was a 1963 graduate of Cardington High School, where he excelled in sports. Larry was a 4-year varsity letter winner and tallied 519 total points during his high school career. He was named first team All-Ohio defense in 1959 and All-Ohio offense in 1960. His longest rush was for 85 yards against Ridgewood. He put up a single game point total of 32 points against Scioto Valley and led the Pirates to 3 straight Mid-Ohio Conference titles. That is the fabulous scoring record of Cardington halfback Larry Coomer. After high school, Larry went on to work at Whirlpool in Marion, where he was a press operator for 45 years. In his spare time, he loved hunting, fishing, and attending auctions. Larry Coomer was honored posthumously by his alma mater when he was inducted into the school's Athletic Hall of Fame during ceremonies conducted Friday, September 14th, when the Cardington Pirates hosted the Colonel Crawford football team. While our family has branched out and may not live in the Cardington area, this community has been a beloved part of our family history for a very long time. We worked the land for many generations and found love and family and friends that have shaped our family into the Coomer legacy that you have today. So in conclusion, I will finish with my grandfather-in-law's words. No, let us give her joy instead of tears, joy that such tears her eyes can dim no more, joy that her heart shall throb no more with fears, joy that will meet her on that other shore. But oh, for those who keep her memory warm, and for her vanished presence still must yearn, who watch and wait for a familiar form that never, never, never can return. God help the hearts that miss her face tonight, with sure and steadfast faith that cannot fail, and lift upon their sad and tearful sight what glory wraps her round within the veil.
I love them all dearly. However, it's my son Hartley I want to talk to you about today. Hartley was our first son. He was born on March 26, 1896. Oh, he was a sweet, quiet, home-loving boy. Everyone who knew him liked him ever so much. We trusted upon him to be truthful, and he would always be ready to do whatever was asked of him without complaint. He was very close to both his father and me. Hartley was baptized unto the Lord at Fairview United Brethren Church in February of 1914. And although not active in church work, he was faithful to the tenets of our faith. In 1914, the Great War started. Oh, how we prayed our country would not join that conflict, but it was not meant to be. And by April of 1917, America joined its allies into combat. My Hartley was called to serve. He left for Camp Sherman in Chillicothe in October of 1917. His letters home always spoke of his longing for home, for both his beloved father and me, in spite of him being inspired by life in training camp as part of the 332nd Ambulance Corps. His regiment was made up of a large number of boys from Ohio, with many different social standings and classes. There were boys of all races, with some speaking foreign languages. One fellow soldier claimed it resembled a polyglot boarding house. After the initial training and drill at Camp Sherman, they went to Camp Perry for rifle training. Oh, how it proved to be a miserable experience. When they arrived, it was cold and raining, and it turned to wet snow. The camp turned into a sea of mud, and their tents did very little to protect them from the elements. Many of the boys fell ill, and a suspected case of smallpox forced vaccination of the entire regiment. When they finally left to return to Camp Sherman in December, the camp was struck with a furious blizzard, which further added to their misery. Back at Camp Sherman, Hartley fell ill with the measles. He was recovering from the measles when he contracted pneumonia. Then he became ill with the dreaded scarlet fever. He died on Sunday, February 10th, 1918, at the age of 21 years, 10 months, and 11 days. He was Camp Sherman's first death from scarlet fever. My boy was brought back to Cardington Tuesday morning by the undertaker Curl and taken to his parlors. We went there before the funeral to see him. We weren't allowed to open his coffin because they were afraid we'd catch the fever. Hardest thing I ever had to do was bury my boy without being able to see his face and say goodbye. Oh, we had his funeral that afternoon. There was a host of people paying their respects. Friends, family. 3 of our daughters were already married by this time. We only had Frank and Ruth at home, but all of our hearts were broken over his loss. After the war finally ended, our country was in debt, and to raise money to pay for the war, counties were asked to sell war bonds. In 1918, Morrow County sold the most war bonds per capita in the entire nation. We were given a plaque that I'm told is still mounted on the wall outside the county courthouse. And then in May of 1919, the Ohio War Bond Committee was told it would be given a granite monument to award to the Ohio county that sold the most war bonds in the summer of bond drive. And we did it again. We won that monument. The village of Mount Gilead offered up in the center of town to put the monument. It was dedicated on December 4th, 1919. It was a cold day, but not uncomfortable. It was dedicated to 29 of our boys who lost their lives during the Great War, including my Hartley. So the next time you drive by that, or ride your horse by, that big white monument in Mount Gilead, and you see the names of the boys etched on it, you'll know the story of my beloved Hartley. Thank you for coming.